If you could just tell us a little bit about what was discussed on the panel today and why it was important for you to be here.
Well, with people who've been doing great work on energy efficiency and clean energy in Vermont for 25 years. Vermont's been a leader. And it started from nothing like an energy efficiency utility to all of the energy efficiency work people have done. And it's made a big difference. It's allowed folks to weatherize their homes. It's allowed them to get access to clean energy. Our utilities have been very, very much part of it. That's all good. It's also created jobs. We had a young woman who is now into weatherization. She used to do personal care, and she's totally excited. So what we've seen in Vermont is that by facing the challenge of climate change and trying to have practical solutions, you can make energy more affordable and you can create good local jobs. That's under attack now in the so-called reconciliation bill. And the Trump administration is literally declaring war on energy efficiency and declaring war on clean energy, wind, solar, geothermal. And why? You know, it's a real problem and it's a real opportunity. And in the so-called reconciliation bill that just passed the House by a single vote, it rolls back all those public policy initiatives that we had in the last administration that have helped folks who are doing clean energy work, efficiency work. And it would really threaten the well-being of a lot of these folks who are creating jobs and affordable options for Vermonters to have a cleaner energy option.
And what do you recommend your constituents to do to fight back against this?
Well, if they know anybody, my colleagues in Congress, said they don't have to worry about me, Bernie, or Becca. We're all with them. We've got to persuade some of my Republican colleagues to kill this terrible legislation, because this is going to really be a setback for the progress that so many organizations here in Vermont have made.
And Vermont is really a leader in climate action and environmental protection, and you've proposed several bills relating to those topics. Is there anything with that you'd like to highlight as well?
Well, my legislation really reflects, I think, what Vermont wants, and they want to have our public policy be promoting affordable, clean energy opportunities. And a lot of my legislation is about that, and a lot of the IRA was about that. And now what we've seen is the Trump administration has gone from, a so-called all of the above strategy to everything below strategy. They literally want to bring back coal and oil, and that's heading in the wrong direction.
And finally, we're here as a community media station. What do you see? Do you see community media as being specifically important in this time?
I think community media is specifically important in everything in this time, because we've got a homogenized news deal nationally, and then you have this enormous fragmentation with social media. And the value of local news is it has a lot more credibility for people. And you talk about everything from a meeting like this to what's going on in the high school basketball championship. And it is, I think, this local connection that all of us are thirsting for. So long live community media.
Thank you so much, Senator Welch. Really appreciate you taking the time.
Thanks.
My name is Peter Walke. I am the Managing Director of Efficiency Vermont. Efficiency Vermont is the statewide energy efficiency utility that helps Vermonters save money, save energy, and help transition to lower carbon, lower cost opportunities.
Amazing. And can you speak a little bit on the panel that you attended today and what was discussed?
Sure. It was wonderful to have Senator Welch here today, along with leaders from around the sort of clean energy world within Vermont, really thinking about what is the state of our workforce, what is the state of federal support for that workforce, and our ability to get help Vermonters get projects done and maybe they'll have the workforce necessary to do those projects. It's a challenging picture at the moment. The money of the programs that were built upon federal dollars in the Inflation Reduction Act and other programs are somewhat in question at this point. In various different ways, and it's hard to know necessarily which ones which sometimes, but it was great to have Senator Welch here to sort of understand where actions are being taken at the federal level, and then hear from folks involved in various aspects, whether it be folks who are like becoming trained in the clean energy world in Vermont to folks who are helping support Vermonters to be able to take loans to be able to fund those projects, can understand what the challenges are. How do we move forward in a way that really gets to the question of, Vermonters want to make these transitions, but they need help because they're expensive and the upfront costs are high, and so we're just everybody's trying to do the right thing, and it's just a challenging environment right now.
And is there anything particular going on at Efficiency Vermont right now that you'd like to highlight?
Sure. We have had some really amazing programs in recent years, really trying to help Vermonters think about how to advance their own desires. And I think we are really looking to continue that work, and we'll be relying on some federal funding that is sort of in process, and we hope that it actually processes to be able to do that work, so we can really think about things like helping Vermonters be able to do basic home repairs so that they can do a weatherization project. They can get their home insulated, right? If you have a cracked foundation or a leaky roof or vermiculite insulation, which has asbestos, or which can have asbestos in it, in your home, it's really hard to know where to start. And we had a small tranche of federal funds that helped us do that work for a while, and that money disappeared like that because there's so much demand. So we're trying to figure out how to roll in a new federal grant that's been in the works for a while, but needs to get final approval from the Department of Energy to really get things moving.
And finally, just to wrap it up, how can folks learn more about Efficiency Vermont or get involved?
Sure. I recommend going to efficiencyvermont.com, or you can look up our phone number there and give our energy advisors a call. If you're a homeowner and want to do a virtual home energy visit, we can set up a time where if you have a smartphone with a camera and walk around your home and show us what things look like. Then our experts can help you understand what opportunities you might have, what would make sense to do first. Homes are big, ungainly beasts that are hard to understand how to start, and that can be a really helpful process to think about where to go from there, whether it be weatherization or new more efficient appliances, or a heat pump, or high efficiency wood stove or wood pellet stove, that sort of thing. Whatever makes sense for your interests, there are real opportunities there.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Peter. Really appreciate it.
I appreciate the time.
Thank you.
I'm Morgan Hood. I am the manager of innovative products and services for our gas utility, the only gas utility in Vermont, Vermont Gas. I began my work with them in 2020. As part of their climate plan, they've been looking to expand the portfolio of services that they provide, and not just strictly be a natural gas provider. They want to be able to provide decarbonized and no carbon thermal energy services to our customers as our customers' needs evolve. We want to be there to meet those needs. So that's my work. I design and develop products and services for the gas utility.
Amazing. And could you tell us a little, so you were a part of the panel that took place today. Could you tell us a little bit about what was discussed kind of overall?
Sure. It was a lot of sad tales of woe. We were discussing how the most recent federal administration that came into power in January has impacted a lot of the funding sources that we rely upon to further our work in energy efficiency, innovation, broadly lowering energy costs for Vermonters, workforce training. We touched upon a lot.
And if you are able to just speak a little bit more towards the specific challenges that Vermont Gas has been facing.
Sure. Today I spoke specifically about Project Windy Ridge, which is a multifamily affordable housing development in Heinsberg. I think this whole audience is well familiar with the fact that Vermont is in dire need of housing, affordable housing with affordable energy. And I was sharing that Vermont Gas has been pursuing community geothermal as a service we could potentially provide for some years now. And in 2023, we were awarded the first stage of a grant, the first phase of a grant through the Department of Energy. It paid for a feasibility study for this development, looking at a networked geothermal system that would bring very efficient heating and cooling to all of the residents at a very low cost. So the first phase of the grant paid for the feasibility. It paid for some workforce training for VGS employees. So our natural gas employees can get trained on providing new decarbonized energy solutions. And it paid for a lot of community outreach. So we had some town meetings in Heinsberg. We met with different groups locally to talk to them about the pros and cons of community geothermal, answer any questions they might have, and discuss the value a utility might be able to play in making community geothermal affordable and accessible to a broader array of Vermonters. I think it was in November, December of this past year, we were awarded phase 2 of that grant funding, and it meant to cover about 90% of the cost of implementing this community geothermal system for these 44 residents. And it also paid for hands-on workforce training. Our natural gas employees would be out in the field, working on the horizontal. It's a geothermal loop that makes a horizontal loop around the property. They'd be working on that. They'd be working on the in-home ground source heat pump equipment. It also provided for additional community outreach and education, and a lot of measurement and verification too, because one of the things we're curious about is the role geothermal and community geothermal can play as Vermont looks to electrify, because geothermal relies on that pretty constant 50-degree temperature in the ground in Vermont. It's the most efficient heating and cooling you can get right now, because unlike an air source heat pump, which is great, like don't get me wrong, we sell and lease them, we think they're wonderful. But unlike an air source heat pump that has to work really hard when it's very hot out, and it's very cool out because it's relying on outdoor air temperature, the geothermal is just steady state, year round, 50 degrees. So when the grid is trying really hard to keep up, it doesn't have to work any harder to serve geothermal. So the grant was going to pay for some pretty ornate measurement and verification, just showing that information, which we would then have shared with Vermonters, policymakers, regulators, so they could see the benefits of community geothermal. So when the new administration came into office, we were in contract negotiations for phase 2 of that grant. The process froze. We've been in contact with our Department of Energy friends at the Geothermal Technologies Office about the future of this grant since then, but they don't really know what the future of it is. And because this is a new housing development, it's on a development timeline, and we've pushed Champlain Housing Trust and Evernorth kind of as far as they can go when it comes to delaying when they can begin this project. So we've run out of time. We're going to look for other paths to bring this community geothermal if we can. We really see benefit in the gas utility learning about this system, modeling this system, building developer familiarity, community familiarity with these systems. So we haven't given up at this time, but the grant was going to be a slam dunk, and now it won't be.
Yeah, and unfortunately, like that is the story that we hear.
That was what we discussed today. We know we're just one of many.
Yep. And but like you mentioned, you're not giving up. You're looking for other opportunities to continue this work, even if it doesn't work on this specific project.
Yep.
Which I think is incredibly important. And before I move on to my next question, I'd love to just take a step back and just could you explain what geothermal is?
Absolutely. It's pretty nerdy. But the geothermal systems, there are 2 types of geothermal systems. There's this deep, deep earth geothermal, which is what you see out west. You also see it like Iceland, where the ground temperatures are just so hot. You can actually use it to generate electricity. that could feed the grid. We're not looking at that in Vermont. Those aren't the ground conditions in Vermont. What we're looking at is what's kind of commonly called the shallow geothermal, where you go maybe 500 feet into the ground. You get that 50-degree temperature all the time. It's a loop of pipe. The pipe is actually the exact same type of pipe that the gas utilities use to move natural gas around. So we know how to work with this pipe infrastructure. So you have a series of boreholes and then a loop, a horizontal loop that just so it circulates into the ground. The horizontal loop feeds the buildings. You keep that horizontal loop, sometimes with the help, it's mostly water, sometimes a little refrigerant in our cold climate. That horizontal loop stays at 50 degrees. And then the ground source heat pump equipment within the home or the building, it's heat pump equipment. So it's already highly efficient, but it's usually an in-unit piece of equipment being fed by this constant steady state 50-degree temperature that's able to really efficiently deliver heating and cooling to a home. Because instead of having to condition your home from 20 degrees outside to 70 degrees, you're starting at 50 all the time. And instead of trying to cool your home when it's 100 degrees out down to 60 degrees, you're starting with a loop that's 50 degrees. So the heat pump itself has a much lighter lift. And that's the benefit of geothermal. I mentioned in my presentation today that geothermal does have a high upfront cost. The ground source heat pump itself, the in-home equipment in this case, is pretty cost comparable to an air source heat pump. So that's almost like an apples to apples. The added expense is that in-ground infrastructure. Maintenance on it is pretty limited. There's not that much that needs to be done, but that initial upfront cost of getting it in the ground can be prohibitive, which is why a utility, who could afford natural gas if you were just generating it and delivering it for your small community?
Sure.
It's the fact that we can spread out the costs and we can prolong the investment repayment period that makes a natural gas utility work, that makes any utility model work. So what can we learn from the traditional utility model and apply to geothermal so that people who otherwise wouldn't be able to access it because it wasn't affordable, could just access it for a monthly payment. The gas utility takes care of it. And that monthly payment, what we're trying to model is a monthly payment to access the loop that is comparable to the amount of electricity you'd save between using an air source heat pump and a geothermal heat pump. So if you're spending 20% more on your electric bills to use an air source heat pump, let's take that 20%, pay for the loop instead. So that's what we're hoping to model, early days. And that's a little bit about geothermal. And as I also mentioned in the presentation, we're not the only utility doing this. We're definitely ahead of the game in a lot of ways with our innovation efforts. But it's been amazing co-founding and co-leading this international, I guess, with Canada, this North American group of gas utilities who are all in varying stages of exploring how they too can offer community geothermal services. Because we're all looking for a future for our utility, Yeah.
That's really incredible. And so how can consumers learn more about the work that VGS is doing?
Well, you can certainly go to our website, which Vermont Gas, you can Google it, vgs.com. And we have a specific page that's dedicated to our current heat pump offerings because we do offer heat pump water heaters, centrally ducted heat pumps that tie into your centrally ducted hot air furnace. And we offer ductless mini splits, which are more space heating and cooling options that you can combine to address your whole home. We offer those today. We don't, and this is probably a shortcoming on our part, have anything on our website that addresses our innovation work, products and services we don't offer yet, but that we're in the process of exploring. So you brought that to my attention. It's something that I should share because it is pretty cool and we are pretty unique as far as gas utilities go, and it's a story worth telling. So go to the website for information that's about the products we offer today, and then anybody can come talk to me about the products we're going to offer tomorrow.
Wonderful. Well, Morgan, thank you so much for sharing this information with us, because like you said, it's really cool for folks to know what's coming down the pipe.
Coming down the pipe. What's next?
So cool. Thank you so much.
Thank you.